The moment the expensive black car stopped outside the small, weather-beaten house, 42-year-old Everett Hale thought someone had come to take the last thing he owned. He stood on the porch in an old gray shirt, one hand resting on the shoulder of his 12-year-old son, Milo. The house behind them needed repairs, the garden had grown wild, and the mailbox leaned dangerously to one side. They had very little left, but Everett had spent years making sure Milo never felt poor in love. Then a young woman stepped out of the car. She was dressed in a perfectly tailored cream suit, carrying a leather folder, and followed by a professional-looking assistant. Her name was Celestine Vera, a 29-year-old CEO whose company had recently become one of the fastest-growing technology firms in the city. Everett recognized her immediately. He had seen her picture in newspapers and business magazines. But he had never expected to see her standing at his front gate. She looked at him for several seconds before quietly saying that her mother was gone, but she had come to pay her mother's debt. If you believe kindness and second chances can change a person's life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Little Kindness Tales. Everett's heart tightened because he knew exactly who Celestine's mother was. Her name was Maribel Vera. 20 years earlier, Maribel had been his wife. And she had disappeared from their lives when Milo's older sister, Celestine, was only 9 years old. Everett had spent years believing his daughter had forgotten him. He had been wrong. 2 decades earlier, Everett's life had looked completely different. He had worked as a mechanic during the day and repaired old machines for local businesses at night. Maribel had dreamed of a luxurious life and often complained that Everett's modest income could never give her the future she wanted. When their daughter Celestine was 9, Maribel left one morning with a suitcase and never returned. She left behind a short letter saying she needed a different life. Everett never understood how someone could walk away from a child so easily. Celestine had cried for weeks. She kept asking when her mother would come home. Everett had no good answer. He simply became both parents. He learned how to braid hair badly. He attended school meetings after sleeping only 3 hours. He learned which medicines Celestine needed when she became sick. He sold his beloved old truck to pay for her school expenses. When she wanted to study business, he took extra night shifts so he could afford her books. But eventually, Celestine disappeared from his life too. Maribel had returned years later and taken Celestine with her, promising Everett that she would give their daughter opportunities he could never provide. Everett fought to keep his daughter, but he had little money and no powerful connections. He lost. For years afterward, he sent letters to Celestine. None were answered. He never knew that Maribel had hidden every one. Celestine grew up believing her father had abandoned her. Meanwhile, Everett continued living quietly. He never remarried. He never spoke badly about Maribel. Whenever Milo asked why his mother wasn't around, Everett simply said that some people became lost and sometimes they needed many years to find their way back. Milo had been born years later, after Everett had rebuilt his life. His mother had passed away when he was very young, leaving Everett to raise him alone. So when Celestine appeared at his home, Everett had no idea what she wanted. She opened the leather folder. Inside was an old photograph. It showed a little girl sitting on Everett's shoulders, laughing while he stood beside a lake. Celestine had been that little girl. Everett stared at the photograph without speaking. Celestine's eyes became wet. She explained that her mother had passed away several months earlier. Before her death, Maribel had finally told Celestine the truth. She had admitted that Everett had never abandoned them. She had been the one who left. She had hidden his letters. She had told Celestine that he didn't want her. And worst of all, she had confessed that Everett had secretly continued paying some of her medical and educational expenses through an account he had created years earlier. Celestine had spent months trying to understand the truth. Then she found something else. Her mother had left behind a box filled with documents, photographs, and letters. Every letter Everett had ever written to his daughter was there. Unread. Unopened. Celestine had read them one by one. One letter had been written on her 10th birthday. Another on her graduation day. Another when she turned 18. Another when she started her first company. Everett had written every year, even when he received nothing in return. That was when Celestine realized the man she had been taught to hate had never stopped loving her. She told Everett that her mother had left behind an unpaid debt. But it wasn't the kind of debt found on a bank statement. Maribel had once borrowed a large amount of money from Everett's father to start a small business. When that business failed, the debt was transferred into Everett's name. Everett had spent years paying it off little by little. Celestine had discovered that the final balance still remained. She had come to clear it. Everett shook his head. He told her she didn't owe him anything. But Celestine explained that she wasn't there only because of the money. She wanted to repay the years he had lost because of a lie. She wanted to give back something he had never asked for. A family. Everett looked at her and saw the little girl from the photograph. For the first time in 20 years, he allowed himself to hope. But hope was frightening. He asked her why she had waited so long. Celestine admitted that she had been afraid. Afraid that he would hate her. Afraid that she would discover he had moved on. Afraid that she would arrive too late. Everett looked toward Milo, who had been silently watching the entire conversation. Then he told Celestine that children should never have to pay for the mistakes of their parents. Those words broke something inside her. Celestine covered her face and cried. Everett didn't know what to do at first. He had imagined meeting his daughter hundreds of times, but never like this. Finally, he stepped forward and hugged her. It was awkward at first. 20 years of distance stood between them. Then Celestine held him tightly. Milo watched from a few feet away. He had never seen his father cry. That afternoon, something changed inside the old house. Celestine stayed for lunch. Everett cooked the simple meal he had made countless times over the years. It wasn't luxurious, but Celestine told him it was the best meal she had eaten in months. Milo slowly began asking her questions about her company. Celestine laughed. Soon the three of them were sitting around the old kitchen table as though they had done it for years. But the story didn't end there. Celestine soon discovered that Everett was struggling financially. The small house was nearly lost because of unpaid repair costs and a mortgage he had fallen behind on while caring for Milo. She offered to pay everything. Everett refused. He told her that he didn't want her money. Celestine smiled through tears and told him she wasn't trying to buy forgiveness. She simply wanted to make sure the man who had sacrificed everything for his children could finally rest. So she found another way. She offered Everett a job managing a restoration project for her company. It was work he actually enjoyed. He accepted. Over the following months, their relationship slowly grew. There were difficult days. Sometimes Everett became distant because old memories returned. Sometimes Celestine became frustrated because she wanted 20 years of lost time to disappear overnight. But neither of them gave up. They learned each other's habits. Celestine discovered that Everett drank his coffee too strong. Everett discovered that Celestine hated thunderstorms. Milo began calling Celestine his sister without hesitation. And one ordinary Sunday afternoon, Celestine arrived at the house carrying groceries. She walked into the kitchen and found Everett repairing an old wooden chair. For a moment, she simply watched him. Then she noticed something sitting beside him. It was the old photograph. Everett had framed it. Celestine smiled. She asked why he had framed an old picture. Everett looked at her and said that some memories deserved another chance. Celestine's eyes filled with tears. She realized then that her father had not been waiting for repayment. He had been waiting for his family to come home. Months later, Celestine surprised Everett again. She had purchased the small neighboring property and transformed it into a community workshop where single parents could learn practical skills and children could receive free tutoring. She named it the Second Chance Center. Everett asked why she had done it. Celestine explained that she couldn't change what had happened to their family. But she could make sure another child didn't grow up believing that being abandoned meant being unloved. Everett looked at his daughter with quiet pride. The young CEO who once arrived in a luxury car now spent weekends painting walls with her father and helping Milo with homework. Money had changed Celestine's life. But forgiveness changed her heart. And Everett finally understood something he had forgotten during all those lonely years. Sometimes people don't return because they suddenly discover the past. Sometimes they return because the truth finally gives them the courage to face it. Celestine never truly paid her mother's debt. Instead, she paid something far more valuable. She gave her father back the years of hope he thought he had lost forever. And Everett gave her something money could never buy. A place to belong. If this story touched your heart, please support the video by liking, sharing, and subscribing to Little Kindness Tales. Your support helps more stories about kindness, forgiveness, family, and second chances reach people who may need them. And before the ending, comment "second chances" if you believe it's never too late to forgive, rebuild a family, and choose kindness. Years later, the old farmhouse still stood. The paint was fresh. The porch had been repaired. The garden was full of flowers. And above the kitchen table hung that same photograph of a little girl sitting on her father's shoulders. Only now, another photograph hung beside it. It showed Everett, Celestine, and Milo standing together outside the Second Chance Center. 3 people who had lost years. 3 people who had found each other again. And beneath the photographs was a simple handwritten sentence. Some debts are not meant to be paid with money. They are meant to be answered with love.